The history of Asian art, or Eastern art, includes a vast range of influences from various cultures and religions. Developments in Asian art historically parallel those in Western art, in general a few centuries earlier. Chinese art, Indian art, Korean art, Japanese art, each had significant influence on Western art, and vice versa. Persian art and Islamic art also had a significant influence on Western art. Balinese art. Balinese art is art of Hindu-Javanese origin that grew from the work of artisans of the Majapahit kingdom, with their expansion to Bali in the late 13th century. For the 16th until the 20th centuries, the village of Kemasan, Klungkung, was the center of classical Balinese art. During the first part of the 20th century, new varieties of Balinese art developed. Since the late 20th century, Ubud and its neighboring villages established a reputation as the center of Balinese art. Ubud and Batuan are known for the paintings, Mas for the wood carvings, Seluk for gold and silver smiths, and Batabilan for the stone carvings. Covarrubias describes Balinese art as a highly developed, although informal Baroque folk art that combines the peasant liveliness with the refinement of classicism of Hinduistic Java, but free of the conservative prejudice and with a new vitality fired by the exuberance of the demonic spirit of the tropical primitive. Eisman correctly pointed out that Balinese art is actually carved, painted, woven, and prepared into objects intended for everyday use rather than as object D art. In the 1920s, with the arrival of many Western artists, Bali became an artist enclave for avant-garde artists such as Walter Spies, Rudolf Bonnet, Adrian Jean Lamaillard, Ari Smith and Donald Friend in more recent years. Most of these Western artists had very little influence on the Balinese until the post-World War II period, although some accounts overemphasize the Western presence at the expense of recognizing Balinese creativity. This groundbreaking period of creativity reached a peak in the late 1930s. A stream of famous visitors, including Charlie Chaplin and the anthropologists Gregory Bateson and Margaret Mead, encouraged the talented locals to create highly original works. During the stay in Bali in the mid-1930s, Bateson and Mead collected over 2,000 paintings, predominantly from the village of Batuan, but also from the coastal village of Sanur. Among Western artists, Spies and Bonnet are often credited for the modernization of traditional Balinese paintings. For the 1950s onwards, Bali's artists incorporated aspects of perspective and anatomy from these artists. More importantly, they acted as agents of change by encouraging experimentation and promoted departures from tradition. The result was an explosion of individual expression that increased the rate of change in Balinese art. Buddhist art. Buddhist art originated in the Indian subcontinent in the centuries following the life of the historical Gautama Buddha in the 6th to 5th century BCE, before evolving through its contact with other cultures and its diffusion through the rest of Asia and the world. Buddhist art traveled with believers as the Dharma spread, adapted, and evolved in each new host country. It developed to the north through Central Asia and into Eastern Asia to form the northern branch of Buddhist art, and to the east as far as Southeast Asia to form the southern branch of Buddhist art. In India, Buddhist art flourished and even influenced the development of Hindu art, until Buddhism nearly disappeared in India around the 10th century CE, due in part to the vigorous expansion of Islam alongside Hinduism. In various spiritual traditions, mandalas may be employed for focusing attention of aspirants and adepts, a spiritual teaching tool. for establishing a sacred space and is an aid to meditation and trance induction. Its symbolic nature can help one to access progressively deeper levels of the unconscious, ultimately assisting the meditator to experience a mystical sense of oneness with the ultimate unity from which the cosmos in all its manifold forms arises. The psychoanalyst Carl Jung saw the mandala as a representation of the center of the unconscious self, and believed his paintings of mandalas enabled him to identify emotional disorders and work towards wholeness in personality. Bhutanese art. Bhutanese art is similar to the art of Tibet. Both are based upon Vajrayana Buddhism, with its pantheon of divine beings. The major orders of Buddhism in Bhutan are Drukpa Kagyu and Nyingma. The former is a branch of the Kagyu school and is known for paintings documenting the lineage of Buddhist masters and the 70 Khenpo. The Nyingma order is known for images of Padmasambhava, who is credited with introducing Buddhism into Bhutan in the 7th century. According to legend, Padmasambhava hid sacred treasures for future Buddhist masters, especially Pema Lingpa, to find. The treasure finders are also frequent subjects of Nyingma art. Each divine being is assigned special shapes, colors, and/or identifying objects, such as lotus, conch shell, thunderbolt, and begging bowl. All sacred images are made to exact specifications that have remained remarkably unchanged for centuries. Bhutanese art is particularly rich in bronzes of different kinds that are collectively known by the name Khamso, even though they are made in Bhutan, because the technique of making them was originally imported from the eastern province of Tibet called Kham. Wall paintings and sculptures in these regions are formulated on the principal ageless ideals of Buddhist art forms. Even though their emphasis on detail is derived from Tibetan models, their origins can be discerned easily. Despite the profusely embroidered garments and glittering ornaments with which these figures are lavishly covered, in the grotesque world of demons, the artists apparently had a greater freedom of action than when modeling images of divine beings. The arts and crafts of Bhutan that represents the exclusive spirit and identity of the Himalayan kingdom is defined as the art of Zorag Chosam, which means the 13 arts and crafts of Bhutan. The 13 crafts are carpentry, painting, papermaking, blacksmithery, weaving, sculpting, and many other crafts. The Institute of Zorag Chosam in Thimphu is the premier institution of traditional arts and crafts set up by the government of Bhutan with the sole objective of preserving the rich culture and tradition of Bhutan and training students in all traditional art forms. There is another similar institution in eastern Bhutan known as Trashi Yangtse. Bhutanese rural life is also displayed in the Folk Heritage Museum in Thimphu. There is also a voluntary artist studio in Thimphu to encourage and promote the art forms among the youth of Thimphu. The 13 arts and crafts of Bhutan and the institutions established in Thimphu to promote these art forms are Cambodian art. Cambodian art and the culture of Cambodia has had a rich and varied history dating back many centuries and has been heavily influenced by India. In turn, Cambodia greatly influenced Thailand, Laos, and vice versa. Throughout Cambodia's long history, a major source of inspiration was from religion. Throughout nearly 2 millennia, Cambodians developed a unique Khmer belief from the syncretism of indigenous animistic beliefs and the Indian religions of Buddhism and Hinduism. Indian culture and civilization, including its language and arts, reached mainland Southeast Asia around the 1st century CE. It is generally believed that seafaring merchants brought Indian customs and culture to ports along the Gulf of Thailand and the Pacific, while trading trading with China. The first state to benefit from this was Funan. At various times, Cambodia culture also absorbed elements from Javanese, Chinese, Lao, and Thai cultures. Visual arts of Cambodia. The history of visual arts of Cambodia stretches back centuries to ancient crafts. Khmer art reached its peak during the Angkor period. Traditional Cambodian arts and crafts include textiles, non-textile weaving, silversmithing, stone carving, lacquer, ceramics, wart murals, and kite making. Beginning in the mid-20th century, a tradition of modern art began in Cambodia, though in the later 20th century both traditional and modern arts declined for several reasons, including the killing of artists by the Khmer Rouge. The country has experienced a recent artistic revival due to increased support from governments, NGOs, and foreign tourists. Khmer sculpture refers to the stone sculpture of the Khmer Empire, which ruled the territory based on modern Cambodia, but rather larger. For the 9th to the 13th century, the most celebrated examples are found in Angkor, which served as the seat of the empire. By the 7th century, Khmer sculpture begins to drift away from its Hindu influences, pre-Gupta for the Buddhist figures, Pallava for the Hindu figures, and through constant stylistic evolution, it comes to develop its own originality, which by the 10th century can be considered complete and absolute. Khmer sculpture soon goes beyond religious representation, which becomes almost a pretext in order to portray court figures in the guise of gods and goddesses. But furthermore, it also comes to constitute a means and end in itself for the execution of stylistic refinement, like a kind of testing ground. We have already seen how the social context of the Khmer kingdom provides a second key to understanding this art, but we can also imagine that on a more exclusive level, small groups of intellectuals and artists were at work, competing among themselves in mastery and refinement as they pursued a hypothetical perfection of style. The gods we find in Khmer sculpture are those of the two great religions of India, Buddhism and Hinduism, and they are always represented with great iconographic precision, clearly indicating that learned priests supervised the execution of the works. Nonetheless, unlike those Hindu images which repeat an idealized stereotype, these images are treated with great realism and originality because they depict living models, the king and his court. The true social function of Khmer art was, in fact, the glorification of the aristocracy through these images of the gods embodied in the princes. In fact, the cult of the Devaraja required the development of an eminently aristocratic art in which the people were supposed to see the tangible proof of the sovereign's divinity, while the aristocracy took pleasure in seeing itself, if it's true, in idealized form, immortalized in the splendor of intricate adornments, elegant dresses and extravagant jewelry. The sculptures are admirable images of the gods, royal and imposing presences, though not without feminine sensuality, makes us think of important persons at the courts, persons of considerable power. The artists who sculpted the stones doubtless satisfied the primary objectives and requisites demanded by the persons who commissioned them. The sculptures represent the chosen divinity in the orthodox manner and succeeds in portraying it with great skill and expertise. High figures of the courts in all of the splendor, in the attire, adornments and jewelry of a sophisticated beauty. Chinese art. Chinese art has varied throughout its ancient history, divided into periods by the ruling dynasties of China and changing technology. Different forms of art have been influenced by great philosophers, teachers, religious figures and even political leaders. Chinese art encompasses fine arts, folk arts and performance arts. Chinese art is art, whether modern or ancient, that originated in or is practiced in China China are by Chinese artists or performers. In the Song dynasty, poetry was marked by a lyric poetry known as ci, which expressed feelings of desire, often in an adopted persona. Also, in the Song dynasty, paintings of more subtle expression of landscapes appeared, with blurred outlines and mountain contours which conveyed distance through an impressionistic treatment of natural phenomena. It was during this period that in painting, emphasis was placed on spiritual rather than emotional elements, as in the previous period. Kung, the oldest extant form of Chinese opera, developed during the Song dynasty in Kunshan, near present-day Shanghai. In the Yuan dynasty, painting by the Chinese painter Zhao Mengfu greatly influenced later Chinese landscape painting, and the Yuan dynasty opera became a variant of Chinese opera which continues today as Cantonese opera. Indian art. Indian art can be classified into specific periods, each reflecting certain religious, political and cultural developments. The earliest examples of the petroglyphs such as those found in Bonbetka, some of them dating to before 5500 BC. The production of such works continued for several millenniums. Later examples include the carved pillars of Ellora, Maharashtra state. Other examples of the frescoes of Ajanta and Ellora caves. Specific periods: Hinduism and Buddhism of the ancient period. Islamic ascendancy, the colonial period. Independence and the post-colonial period. Modern and postmodern art in India. One of the most popular art forms in India is called Rangoli. It is a form of sand painting decoration that uses finely ground white powder and colors, and is used commonly outside homes in India. The visual arts are tightly interrelated with the non-visual arts. According to Kapila Vatsyayan, classical Indian architecture, sculpture, painting, literature, music and dancing evolved their own rules conditioned by the respective media, but they shared with one another not only the underlying spiritual beliefs of the Indian religio-philosophic mind, but also the procedures by which the relationships of the symbol and the spiritual states were worked out in detail. Insight into the unique qualities of Indian art is best achieved through an understanding of the philosophical thought, the broad cultural history, social, religious and political background of the artworks. Indonesian art. Indonesian art and culture has been shaped by long interaction between original indigenous customs and multiple foreign influences. Indonesia is central along ancient trading routes between the Far East and the Middle East, resulting in many cultural practices being strongly influenced by a multitude of religions, including Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism and Islam, all strong in the major trading cities. The result is a complex cultural mixture very different from the original indigenous cultures. Indonesia is not generally known for paintings, aside from the intricate and expressive Balinese paintings, which often express natural scenes and themes from the traditional dances. Other exceptions include indigenous Kenya paint designs based on, as commonly found among Austronesian cultures, endemic natural motifs such as ferns, trees, dogs, hornbills and human figures. These are still to be found decorating the walls of Kenya Dalut longhouses in East Kalimantan's Apokayan region. Calligraphy, mostly based on the Quran, is often used as decoration as Islam forbids naturalistic depictions. Some foreign painters have also settled in Indonesia. Modern Indonesian painters use a wide variety of styles and themes. Indonesia has a long Bronze and Iron Ages, but the art form particularly flourished from the 8th century to the 10th century, both as stand-alone works of art, and also incorporated into temples. Most notable are the hundreds of meters of relief sculpture at the Temple of Borobudur in central Java. Approximately 2 miles of exquisite relief sculpture tell the story of the life of Buddha and illustrate his teachings. The temple was originally home to 504 statues of the seated Buddha. This site, as with others in central Java, show a clear Indian influence. Japanese art. Japanese art and architecture is works of art produced in Japan from the beginnings of human habitation there, sometime in the 10th millennium BC, to the present. Japanese art covers a wide range of art styles and media, including ancient pottery, sculpture in wood and bronze, ink painting on silk and paper, and a myriad of other types of works of art, from ancient times until the contemporary 21st century. Ukiyo, meaning floating world, refers to the impetuous young culture that bloomed in the urban centers of Edo, Osaka, and Kyoto that were a world unto themselves. It is an ironic allusion to the homophone term, sorrowful world, the earthly plane of death and rebirth from which Buddhists sought release. The art form rose to great popularity in the metropolitan culture of Edo during the second half of the 17th century, originating with the single-color works of Ishikawa Moronobu in the 1670s. At first, only India ink was used, then some prints were manually colored with a brush. But in the 18th century, Suzuki Harunobu developed the technique of polychrome printing to produce nishiki-e. Japanese painting is one of the oldest and most highly refined of the Japanese arts, encompassing a wide variety of genre and styles. As with the history of Japanese arts in general, the history of Japanese painting is a long history of synthesis and competition between native Japanese aesthetics and adaptation of imported ideas. The origins of painting in Japan date well back into Japan's prehistoric period. Simple stick figures and geometric designs can be found on Jomon period pottery and Yayoi period Dotaku bronze bells. Mural paintings with both geometric and figurative designs have been found in numerous tumulus from the Kofun period. Ancient Japanese sculpture was mostly derived from the idol worship in Buddhism or animistic rites of Shinto deity. In particular, sculpture among all the arts came to be most firmly centered around Buddhism. Materials traditionally used were metal, especially bronze, and, more commonly, wood, are often lacquered, gilded, or brightly painted. By the end of the Tokugawa period, such traditional sculpture, except for miniaturized works, had largely disappeared because of the loss of patronage by Buddhist temples and the nobility. Korean art. Korean art is noted for its traditions in pottery, music, calligraphy, painting, sculpture, and other genres, are often marked by the use of bold color, natural forms, precise shape and scale, and surface decoration. While there are clear and distinguishing differences between three independent cultures, there are significant and historical similarities and interactions between the arts of Korea, China, and Japan. The study and appreciation of Korean art is still at a formative stage in the West. Because of Korea's position between China and Japan, Korea was seen as a mere conduit of Chinese culture to Japan. However, recent scholars have begun to acknowledge Korea's own unique art, culture and important role in not only transmitting Chinese culture but assimilating it and creating a unique culture of its own. An art given birth to and developed by a nation is its own art. Generally, the history of Korean painting is dated to approximately 108 CE, when it first appears as an independent form. Between that time and the paintings and frescoes that appear on the Goryeo dynasty tombs, there has been little research. Suffice to say that till the Joseon dynasty the primary influence was Chinese painting, though done with Korean landscapes, facial features, Buddhist topics, and an emphasis on celestial observation in keeping with the rapid development of Korean astronomy. Throughout the history of Korean painting, there has been a constant separation of monochromatic works of black brushwork on very often mulberry paper or silk, and the colorful folk art or min hwa, ritual arts, tomb paintings, and festival arts which had extensive use of color. This distinction was often class-based. Scholars, particularly in Confucian art, felt that one could see color in monochromatic paintings within the gradations and felt that the actual use of color coarsened the paintings and restricted the imagination. Korean folk art and painting of architectural frames was seen as brightening certain outside wood frames, and again within the tradition of Chinese architecture, and the early Buddhist influences of profuse rich tallow and primary colors inspired by art of India. Laotian art. Laotian art includes ceramics, Lao Buddhist sculpture, and Lao music. Lao Buddhist sculptures were created in a large variety of material including gold, silver and most often bronze. Brick and mortar also was a medium used for colossal images. A famous of these is the image of Phya Vat in Vientiane. Although a renovation completely altered the appearance of the sculpture, and it no longer resembles a Lao Buddha, wood is popular for small, votive Buddhist images that are often left in caves. Wood is also very common for large, life-size standing images of the Buddha. The most famous two sculptures carved in semi-precious stone of the Phra Kyo and the Phra Phut the Butsavarit. The Phra Kyo, which is probably of Xiangsan origin, is carved from a solid block of jade. It rested in Vientiane for 200 years before the Siamese carried it away as booty in the late 18th century. Today it serves as the Palladium of the Kingdom of Thailand, and resides at the Grand Palace in Bangkok. The Phra Phut the Butsavarit, like the Phra Kyo, is also enshrined in its own chapel at the Grand Palace in Bangkok. Before the Siamese seized it in the early 19th century, this crystal image was the Palladium of the Lao Kingdom of Champasak. Many mostly wooden Buddhist sculptures have been assembled inside the Pakao caves. Many beautiful Lao Buddhist sculptures are carved right into the Pakao caves. Near Pakao the Tham Ting and the Tham Thung are near Luang Prabang, Laos. They are a magnificent group of caves that are only accessible by boat about 2 hours upstream from the center of Luang Prabang, and have recently become more well known and frequented by tourists. The caves are noted for their impressive Buddhist and Lao-style sculptures carved into the cave walls, and hundreds of discarded Buddhist figures laid out over the floors and wall shelves. They were put there as their owners did not wish to destroy them, so a difficult journey is made to the caves to place their unwanted statue there. Nepalese art. The ancient and refined traditional culture of Kathmandu, for that matter in the whole of Nepal, is an uninterrupted and exceptional meeting of the Hindu and Buddhist ethos practiced by its highly religious people. It has also embraced in its fold the cultural diversity provided by the other religions such as Jainism, Islam and Christianity.